I want to talk to you about the acid test. And I know most people have probably never heard that. And it has nothing actually to do with being base or acid. It's an acronym. No, it's AC. A.C.I.D. My spelling skills are not what they might be. Acid, A.C.I.D. And that stands for arrogance, complacency, ignorance, and distractions. Pat, why
Absolutely.
do these things matter to us?
Well, primarily for this reason. If you look up any random NTSB accident report that that was based on a general aviation accident, I'm talking about little airplanes like we fly. You'll find in every single incident, other than pilot incapacitation or catastrophic airframe failure, which of course statistically is non-existent, statistically non-existent.
Incredibly rare,
Yeah.
unbelievably rare.
If you factor out those two things, you will find one or more of those factors, arrogance, complacency, ignorance, and or distractions in every single one of those accident reports. And every single one of those things lead to pilot induced errors of some sort that cost perhaps the pilot's life and maybe the passengers as well.
Well, arrogance, the A one. Let's start alphabetically with A. The
Okay.
thing that jumps out at me with that one is something you said in a recent video we did that I think is absolutely true. There's safety meetings everywhere. The Air Safety Institute has all kinds of free videos and courses, things online.
Yeah.
But the people who need those most are the people who don't attend. They have this sense of, I got it, I know what I'm doing. When in reality, we all need to improving our skills all the time.
Yeah, it's that attitude. It's the attitude of I don't need to go up and practice any takeoffs and landings. I've got that. Even though it's been 2 months since I've flown. I don't need any. I don't need any instruction. It's just all of those kinds of. I'm 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 not I'm. I think I'm better than I am.
Mm.
And boy, that and you can tell it in the attitudes when you talk to certain pilots, you can tell that they're kind of proud of themselves, more so than we normally are. I don't know
Well, it
what
is
pilot.
hard to shake that out of a pilot, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's hard. There's probably not one pilot that I know that isn't proud of that ticket in his or her pocket, and that's as it should be. It took a lot of work to get there. It took a lot of work, and it took a lot of work to keep it there.
mhm.
But there are some that kind of stand out among the rest of us. Um, I'll tell you, there was a guy that called me some years ago to check him out in a tailwheel airplane. And he told me when he first called me, I can't remember his name, not that it's important now, but he told me when he first called me that he hadn't flown tailwheel in 5 or 6 years, something like that. But he says, I'm a good pilot. He says, I think you'll be impressed.
Being a tail wheel pilot, I know that not doing it for 5 or 6 years is
Yeah.
very close to
Yeah.
never having done it.
That is a quote. I'm a pretty good pilot. I think you'll be impressed.
Oh man.
And he hung around the airport for a few years, and he's since moved on somewhere else. I don't know why, but he incurred the nickname Superfly.
Not in a flattering sense, I assume.
Not in a flattering sense. So, yeah, Superfly. So but that's for me when I think of arrogance, and he was a nice guy. He was really a really nice guy. But when I think of arrogance, I think of Superfly.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that attitude is out there and it will bite you. So avoiding arrogance is a good idea. How about complacency? You know what I think of? Maybe not the thing most people do. I think of the guy who's got his airplane tied down on the ramp, not in a hangar necessarily, or somebody who's sharing an airplane with somebody else, and in a club setting or something like that, or a
Right.
flight school. And they're just like, I flew this a couple days ago. It's great. I'm just going to jump in and go. And they don't do the walk around because
Yeah.
I have gone out to fly an airplane that was flown last night. and found a whole strip of metal missing from the underside of one of the wings,
Right.
or just real damage because somebody drove into it on the parking lot. Or even, I know this is a weird one, I stopped for the $100 hamburger, I went in and ate and said, hey, can you top off my tanks while I'm here? And
Yeah.
I don't check the fuel, and they put in the wrong kind of fuel.
Oh
That
yeah.
kind of thing happens. It really does. And if you become complacent and say, I don't need to do a pre-flight, we're good, you're taking a big risk for not much of a savings.
Yeah, checking the weather would be perhaps another element. You could probably put that in a couple of different categories, but certainly checking the weather, assuming that it's going to be fine. And I'm not talking necessarily about going up and doing a few takeoffs and landings and seeing the traffic pattern. Although you should check it certainly for TFRs and things like that. But if you're going to make any kind of meaningful trip and don't check the weather, you're really taking an unnecessary chance. But yeah, it'll be all right. I've been fine before.
Well, I'll tell you another one that's really common is not checking NOTAMs. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many times over the past half dozen years or so, there's been a lot of airport construction down my way. I guess federal money freed up and they've been resurfacing runways and building taxiways and all sorts of things. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a non-towered airport taxiing out to go and somebody calls in that they're on final for 1-1, and I end up calling them back saying, that's closed. The big X, the trucks and the guys on it, but they
Yeah.
didn't check. And they're literally on short final and they're still trying to figure out why this doesn't look right.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I have a friend who does a lot of angel flights, and they were coming. It was actually couple guys in the airplane. They were coming back with a passenger in the back, and the weather began to get a little bit iffy. And the weather had been iffy all day long, but they're both instrument rated pilots, excellent pilots, flying an airplane that was quite capable. In my mind, they weren't taking any kind of unnecessary risk at all. But the weather began to deteriorate beyond what they both felt comfortable with, which, and to their credit, they bailed out and not bailed out of the airplane. They bailed out of the weather and landed at an airport to wait it out. In fact, they ended up staying overnight. But what they didn't realize was that airport was notamed that their fuel was out of service, that their fuel pumps were out of service, and they didn't. They landed with not a lot of gas left, and so they were able to get the pump working to get enough gas to be able to go to an airport where they could take on some more fuel. But you know, here's a chance. Here's a situation where they didn't expect to have to land there at that
Mhm.
airport. That ended up being their alternate. But if they had availed themselves of the reg that says you should need to know all available information, they might have checked the NOTAM on that airport as a potential stop in the event the weather got bad, which in fact it did, and they would have seen that the fuel dump was NOTAMed out, and they could have gone to a different airport where they did have fuel.
That
So
would have made the day easier.
would have made the day much easier. So there's a few examples of complacency for sure.
Now, distraction is one I talk about with people often when I do flight reviews,
Yeah,
because if you
but
take a passenger, you have a built-in distraction. That's
that's
just there.
true. But
But
but haven't we missed ignorance?
well, I was going alphabetically.
Oh, I thought we were spelling acid.
Oh, well, yeah, we can go either way. See, this is a lack of planning.
Yeah, rehearsal. What, us?
Co Coin flip. You wanna do ignorance or you wanna do distraction? Your
You're the
choice.
boss. I will follow your lead.
Okay. Then if we're dealing distraction because we've spelled acid incorrectly here, passengers are certainly a distraction, no doubt about that. But one that really concerns me a lot, and it really does, because there have been some serious accidents because of this, gadgets. I
Yeah.
got my phone, I got my iPad, I got a couple cameras in the cockpit so people can see how cool I am. I'm going to put this up on social media, and I'm not looking for traffic or that flock of birds or watching my fuel burn or seeing if I'm off course. And it is astounding how wrong you can go in just a couple minutes by getting caught up in the cockpit with a bunch of stuff that doesn't have a damn thing to do with the flight.
And even if you have a, even if you have, if you don't, even if you don't have any gadgetry in the cockpit, you're just the avionics in the airplane alone, particularly if you've just gotten the airplane recently, or perhaps you just had a panel upgrade or something, and you have new toys in the instrument panel. That can be a tremendous distraction. Just trying to figure out what button to push to get what you want up on the screen or on the CDI or whatever the case may be can be a tremendous distraction. That's one of the things that I don't like about certain aircraft manufacturers that tout the you know the the big electronic panels and all the buttons and knobs and the big screens on the panel and whatnot. Um, those are avionics have their place. Make no mistake about it. Both of my airplanes are glass panel airplanes, technically advanced airplanes in the FAA's eyes. And the buttons and the knobs and the screens and the pictures and the information available to us is invaluable. Absolutely, absolutely believe that.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend out your way just the other day. He's buying a brand new SR-22, Cirrus SR-22, beautiful airplane, very modern panel. And I was saying, you're probably going to want to spend some time on the ground with ground power, just learning the buttons and all that sort of thing. He goes, "Oh yeah, I'm doing the training up in Knoxville, and then I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to sit on the ground with the manual and an instructor and a plug into the airplane so I can run the systems and just learn how they work." It's one of the reasons I respect him, because you're exactly right. I've actually talked to people who are like, "Oh, I've been flying this airplane with a glass panel, and I'm going to go fly this other one. It'll be cake." Well, the one
Yeah,
you've been flying has a Dynon system, and the other one has a Garmin system. There's nothing similar about them. The display is
exactly.
the same, but how you get it is completely different. And you're right. You can get caught up going 135 knots, head down, punching buttons, trying to figure out, how do I get that to light up? And you have no idea what's in front of you.
When I did my CSIP training, um,
Go ahead and explain what CSIP means for people like me who don't know.
Cirrus Standardized Instructor Pilot.
Bless you, sir.
Thank you very much. When I did my CSIP training, in this case, it was up in Duluth before they opened the Knoxville Center. I flew with a really, really good instructor, and we flew for 3 days, not 3 days straight, but we flew for some period of time, each of 3 days. In June in Duluth, Minnesota, the weather was beautiful all 3 days, absolutely gorgeous all 3 days. But I could not tell you any details about the terrain over which we flew during those 3 days because I was heads down in the cockpit trying to learn the buttonology. Now, this is despite the fact of having a full simulator, desktop simulator available to me to sit at for hours and just push the buttons and figure out, with the help of the instructor, what everything does. So even with multiple dry runs, when you have the distraction of actually trying to fly the airplane on top of figuring out what buttons to push, it is a deadly combination. And that is one of the big takeaways from that experience up there. It was a wonderful experience, and Cirruses are wonderful airplanes. But boy, oh boy, they have become so technically advanced. Um, a typical Perspective Plus system has, I don't know, somewhere around 150 buttons and knobs, maybe more. I haven't counted them recently. I don't remember the exact number, but something like 150 buttons and knobs. They all do something different.
I'll tell you, I wrote an online course once on how to operate the Garmin 530.
Hmm.
Which is a remarkable device when it came out.
It
It really
is,
was terrific.
still
But it
is.
was days and days of playing with that desktop simulator and figuring out, okay, push this, turn that, select this. It doesn't come to you intuitively. And trying to
Right.
learn that on the fly, as some people do,
Yeah.
really is going to be a problem, because first of all, you're not operating the box very well. Second, you're not flying the plane very well. That
Exactly.
combination could get ugly.
Could get ugly quick.
So let's since we're going out of order, apparently, let's jump into ignorance. And here's the one that leaps out at me because it happens all the time. And you'd think no responsible pilot would ever do this, but I'm launching off from point A, which I'm familiar with, going to point B, a place I've been a bunch of times before. This is going to be great. Oh, I didn't know there was a presidential TFR in between the two of those things. And all of a sudden, I got real problems because they don't take that lightly anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. Or going to an airport perhaps you've never been to before, and maybe it's a non-towered field, or maybe it's a towered field, but it's got the letter L in the airport data block with a little asterisk by that letter L. I would bet you if you ask 10 people what that L means with the asterisk, they're going to say, I'll bet you 9 out of 10 people will say, "Oh, pilot control lighting." Well, usually that is what that means. But that little L, that little asterisk says special conditions apply, or special conditions apply, check the chart supplement. And it might be, as in one airport close by here, that the CTAF is one frequency and the pilot control lighting is another one.
There's a symbol on sectional charts now that I have not seen in any of the documentation other than the sectional chart. And I'm sure it's there someplace. I've just never
Yeah.
found it. It looks like the markings for a restricted area, but it's black lines. And I've had people ask me repeatedly, gee, what is this? Because there's one that goes all the way across the peninsula of Florida. That's where there's drone traffic and not
Yeah,
the little quadcopters.
right.
This is the big military drones. You've got to know about that. And I've actually been in the air with flight following from Orlando, and they've warned me about drone traffic in a direction. It's a little disorder. It's weird because it's an aircraft and it's as big as your airplane. I'm flying a
Yeah,
152, but there's
yeah,
nobody in that.
yeah.
So
We have we have drone traffic out of Ellington, which is a former Air Force base here in Houston. But we have drone traffic. I mean, Predator drones, big
yeah,
drones, and the standard operating procedure is that usually it's a Civil Air Patrol airplane accompanies the drone after it takes off until it gets out over the Gulf of Mexico. But they actually have an airplane
mhm.
flying, I assume, loose formation with the drone, just in case. So I don't know what they would do if things went haywire, but I just don't know much about that stuff. But I just find it interesting because you're right; those are big airplanes.
Yeah, I actually met a girl once at Sun and Fun several years ago.
Yeah,
19 years old, just sharp as could be, and her full-time job was flying a Cessna 210 and trailing along with drones out west.
yeah,
But, people always think of these little DJI drones, the
right,
quadcopters and things. The
yeah,
military has flown drones from the Dakotas to Europe. I mean, they're not small aircraft. They're
yeah,
big and they're moving. And, it's worth knowing that symbology on the chart. Go look up what that symbology means if you don't know, because you can get real surprised. And of course, there used to be just one or two places in America with the little rocket symbol. Now
right.
there's a bunch of them.
They're all
You
over the
really
place.
don't want to stray into one of those places when there's a launch sequence going on. So it's worth not being ignorant and taking the time at your kitchen table or on the planning table at the FBO or whatever. Let's actually look at this flight and not just assume I've done this 100 times. It's going to be fine, because this flight might be different.
Yeah, you mentioned looking at chart symbols and things like that. From my perspective, when I'm giving a check ride, of course, private and commercial in particular, but even to some extent instrument. One of the things that we do is we'll lay a chart out on the table, or we'll open up ForeFlight or one of the flight apps, and I'll just kind of say, "Whoa, wait a minute, what's that?" Um, and I'll tell you something, Jamie. There are times it is disturbing how little the applicant knows about the actual symbols on the chart. Now, nobody expects them to know all of the symbols that are on the chart. If you go into ForeFlight or the FAA's website or what have you, there's a book called the Aeronautical Chart User's Guide. It's a free download from the FAA, and it's in the document section of ForeFlight.
Great publication. Really
Yeah,
worthwhile.
the first time I bought one, this is before downloading was a thing. It was something like 50 or 60 pages. Well, it's 80 or 90 pages now, and it's every single chart marking on IFR and VFR charts. Um, and there's some real squirrely stuff in there that you generally don't see, but you need to know where to find it.
I will tell you the slightly embarrassing reason why I became really focused on what are those symbols mean. I had this great flight instructor early on, and he folded up a sectional chart. Back then, we actually used full blown paper charts.
Yeah, yeah.
He folded it up so it just showed the west coast of Florida, and he put it down on the table, and he points off just to the west of Tampa over the Gulf. There's a black circle, a dark black circle. And he's like, "What's that?" And I'm racking my brain trying to figure it out. And I'm looking at the legend down at the bottom and I don't see anything. And I'm just struggling. And finally he laughs and opens it up. It's the O in Gulf of Mexico. Pat, the whole point of this is we're not infallible. We absolutely should keep up on our training and seek proficiency. We really do have to make a conscious attempt to do that. But if we can avoid putting ourselves in the position where we suffer the fate of failing the acid test, if we can stay away from arrogance and complacency and ignorance and distractions, we got a really good shot at having a more pleasant flight and fewer problems in our flying life.
and living to fly many, many more times and many, many more years.
That's my goal.
Yeah, me too.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Y'all come back and see us sometimes. Pat and I really have a good time doing this. I hope you learned something from us and seek out a safety meeting. Go to something. If you've never been to one, it's fun. Sometimes there's donuts, sometimes there's pizza. Do it. Click like on this, share this video on social media so other people will know how smart you are, that you discovered us before they did, and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll see us more and more frequently because we'll miss you if you don't. See you next time, y'all. Take care.
Adios.